And we are live, I think so. Hi.
Hi.
So good to see you, and thank you for coming. Thank you for saying yes. I'm just gonna
Thank you for having
dive
me.
right in. Yeah. Um, so I kind of reached out following my intuition, an intuitive nudge, an impulse, and something that I shared with you that resonated with me was this quote that I've heard recently, and it's "Our power lies in our aliveness." And for me, you are one of the few people that I know that is so authentic and so alive and so happy. Um, so my curiosity really is to like really understand your inner workings, your world, your worldviews, how you operate, and how you actually came to be who you are. So I wanted to start by, like, you've done 15 years of personal development. You're an expert on the path, like, of, really self-inquiring and self-discovery. I'm curious to know who you were before that and how the
Mm.
life was before, you came into exploring yourself and becoming who you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that intro, by the way. That was just so beautiful to hear. Thank you. I appreciate that. Um, so who I was before. Um, well, growing up when I was little, I was kind of always very intuitive, very sensitive, very open, and I was just picking up on information around about people, how they're feeling and what's happening. But I start to notice almost how they're feeling and how they're showing up is there's a dissonance. And it would confuse me, like, oh, they're feeling sad, but why are they acting a little bit, happy or, inauthentic? So I've always had that intuitive and sensitive connection to energy and emotions um, of people. And growing up in Turkey, I'm from Istanbul, Turkey, and that's where I live now. I was in UK for 12 years and I moved here a year ago. I am a daughter of a very successful psychologist here. So growing up, I learned about psychology and human behavior and why do people do what they do. And then I kind of said no to all of that and went into architecture. I kind of just left all that. And doing that, that felt quite like not me. It felt really technical. And I picked that because I wanted to do something creative, but it turned out something really technical. So in that degree, I felt like a bird trying to swim. Like it felt quite like not me. And then after finishing that, like you said, I was always into personal growth and spirituality and like so many trainings. I've always done that in the background ever since like I was 14. And eventually, like after finishing a degree, like a year or two later, and during that time, I worked with kids also. I loved children. I was a nanny. I worked at a school, did a few other things. I decided to actually go for coaching and intuition and breath work and dance and all the things I'm doing now. So it was around that year, that was 2017, maybe like 7, 8 years ago. That's when I actually committed, okay, like this is my path now. I'm going to own it. I'm going to commit to it and live this fully and support people, guide others to, you mentioned about the word aliveness, like to be alive, to be their authentic selves and following their dreams and whatever lights them up, whatever ignites their soul and makes them feel like, yes, this is me. I started to guide people around that. So just going back to your question, who was I before? I guess I was disconnected from that path. And that's the thing that happens when you're not being true to yourself. It's not very inspiring. You might feel a bit lost or you might feel heavy or difficult. But once you get on the path, and this is what I felt like 7, 8 years ago, once I committed to it, things just start to escalate in a super positive, like flowing way. Um, so yeah, maybe I was still me before, but I guess less authentic, less true version of me, maybe in hiding and not being as brave as I am today, maybe.
Mm. And what you say, as soon as you commit, it sounds like the whole journey was quite natural for you, or were there like any significant moments that were keep realigning you to the commitment
Mm.
that you talked about?
Well, yeah, there was definitely moments. Let me actually remember them. Well, there was one moment when I was definitely the first one when I moved to UK, like actually leaving Turkey and getting out of that cultural conditioning and everything I was grow up in and lived in, getting out of that so that I can discover who I am in a clean slate, almost like, okay, I'm totally out of all the things I've learned and kind of have been absorbing and taking it on. And I didn't know which one is me and which one is just my surrounding, and I'm just reflecting it. So that was a huge moment. That was one that was like, I remember when I first moved to Oxford, that's where I studied architecture. The first 3 months, I was like, right, I'm not even going to have Turkish friends. I'm just going to be totally open to everything here and explore and learn. And yeah, I had it like an intensive learning for sure. That was one moment. And then another moment was studying architecture. I had a breakdown in the end of first year. We had something called crits, like you go and you present your project, and then the teacher goes, yeah, well done, okay, you pass, or you need to do this again. And like I didn't pass the first one. I was just like crying, breaking down, and going, why am I doing this? I don't even want to be here, and I'm like failing at something I don't even want to do. It was definitely a low. And like the first inklings of you really have to do what you want to do in life came in there. It's like there's a quote by Jim Carrey. Was it Jim Carrey? No, I think someone else giving us. Yeah, it's Jim Carrey. His dad was actually really funny, but he ended up doing a job he didn't even want to do. So he saw his dad just like suffering for years. So he decided, I might as well go for something I love and fail at it. At least I'm doing something I love, and because I'm doing it with joy and love, surely I'm going to be successful at it. It was something like that. So that I was like, okay, I'm going to finish this degree because I started it. Um, I'm quite resilient and determined. I like to finish things when I start them, but it's also okay to change your mind. I learned that too. There was another moment. Another moment was I actually got fired from one of the schools I worked in, and it was because they had a specific way of working with children, and I was a little bit more empathetic and kind, and maybe not in the very disciplinary path. Um, they were shouting a little bit to children, and I wouldn't shout. So yeah, our ethos maybe we're just not aligned. So when I got fired, I was like, well, okay, I'm just gonna go for coaching. I'm just gonna do like what my dream is. So a few setbacks like that. So even though in the moment seemingly they might look like a failure and or a low point, it was actually a good realignment in what I truly want to do.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. And when was the moment of recommit? When you said like I committed to this being my thing, and I'm wondering also, um, was that like an ongoing thing where you kept having to recommit, or was it just one off and I'm committed and this is it?
Mm. There were few. There were few for sure. The first one was, yeah, around that time. So after I stopped working at this school, I actually worked at a company. They were organizing an exhibition in Somerset House, actually, and in London. And I was doing the. It's so interesting to talk about this. I haven't talked about this in such a long time. This stuff is like 8 years ago, like kind of buried in that old life. Um, anyway, I was doing the drawings of it, so like plans and elevations and all that. And as I was doing that, after a while, because also at that point, I've gone to so many job interviews in architecture and I've kind of started to meet people like in the industry. They were looking to reach out to people that like architects or designers, they want to like come and, hey, like, do you want to exhibit in our project that we're doing? So I said, I can just call them up and ask if you want. So I kind of ended up being on their sales team. I kind of calling up people and talking and giving information. And I realized I prefer this much more than like just sitting in front of a computer and like drawing all these things. And it's quite repetitive and a little bit boring for me. Um, so it's like, okay, I love talking to people, great. And I love helping people, even in doing architecture and all the things I've done. I've kind of been really in tune with people, going and talking to them, giving them what they need and supporting them. So after a while, I quit that job. Um, yeah. And around that time, it reached a point. There was one of the trainings I did. It was called Natural Success, and they teach you alchemy, intuition, how to listen to your intuition, act on the guidance of it, which is what I do in my one-to-one sessions now. I use one of their like main frameworks. It was a life-changing training for me. So as I was doing that, we would give intuitive readings to each other as a practice. And none of the readings I got was about architecture. It was all about like helping people, empowering women, and all of that, like giving talks and doing workshops and sessions and writing books. So the more I heard that confirmation, sometimes it really helps when you hear it from someone outside of you that knows you and connects to your truth. I was like, okay, like it gave me a lot of confirmation. Um, and your question was, yeah, when was the moment I committed? So after hearing so many confirmations, I started a coaching qualification. I trained with Aliveness, really recommend them, they're great. I also worked with them as well as a supervisor for a while. I started a training in 2016 and it was like 6 month long training. And even during the training, I realized I know this stuff already. Like I've kind of been doing this all my life, but it gave me that push. It gave me that permission to be like, okay, yeah, go for this. Like do this. This is what you want to do. And yeah, you can do it now. So that was like when I committed, when I was doing the training. And even as I was doing the training, even before my session hours were complete, I started to give a women's workshop called Goddess Circle at the time. And in that, we would meditate, we would dance, and then we would do breath work. And around the same time, I also started to do breath work with my partner at the time. And they just grew and grew, and I kept doing them. So, yeah, it was starting that coaching qualification, but also at the same time letting go of architecture, I would say. Yeah, that's one of them. Yeah.
Mm. 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 And so the commitment was like, this is it, this is what I'm gonna do, and I'm not looking back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, it was. And then the more I did sessions and doing group journeys, group workshops, I'm also going back in time, remembering it was 2017, 2018, 2019. And by that point, people start to hear about you, people start to hear and what you do. And so people around me also saw that, okay, she's not doing architecture anymore, like this is her path. And I also started to own it more. It was funny. I think it was after 2 years, I was still receiving messages on LinkedIn from like architecture stuff. So one day, I think it was 2019, I was like, I need to do something about this. I cut the cord or something. 2019, I think it was. Yeah. I um I decided to do a ritual and I burnt all my architecture things. I maybe kept just my dissertation thing and something else, like my final, portfolio thingy. Maybe like 3 items really. So I burnt all those like big, like A1 pages and all that with my really close friend at the time. We kind of did a fire thing and I just like burnt them. And yeah, after that, they didn't happen. So that was another commitment, like just doing that ceremony and going, okay, now we're totally closing this and completely channeling our energy into this. And yeah, like after that, over the years, it was just deeper commitment, like every year. Pandemic happened, I did online free breathwork journeys, dance journeys every week to support people. My pandemic was very productive. Like it almost didn't feel like, isolation. I was just creating the whole time. Yeah, and then 2021 came. I did my sexological bodywork training, somatic sex education training. And then I was also assisting the trainings where you and I met. It's the trainings. I was on the team a few times. I also did their trainings. Um, yeah, so whatever training I did, I would always bring it into my work in some ways. Yeah, and then 2022, I did the first women's retreat. Women's programs carried on. Um, yeah, then last year I did my first men's retreat. Did another one this year. I wrote a book. Now it's about to come out. So I think all the steps kind of they create a deeper commitment, you know? Yeah.
Mm, mm. Wow, and it's so like it's almost it feels like you kept being nudged to a certain direction and you kept just saying yes, okay, yes, I'm gonna go there, yes, yes, yes. So it
Yeah.
feels like a very beautiful trajectory that yeah. And
Yeah.
I remember a few years ago, I think 2 or 3 years ago, you shaved your head on your birthday.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was like it seemed to me like it was a very big portal for you. It seemed like
Mm.
even like following you on Instagram, it like something like drastically shifted. Then you kind of like you
Mm.
died and you were reborn into this phoenix, like, and even the colors on your social media, they're just like
Yeah, that's true actually. I was trying to find that point. When was the time? Because I always loved colors, but when was it? Yeah, it was after that. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, you're right. It was a big drastic change. So that was yeah, 2 years ago, 2022. It was actually 2021. I first had the idea like I kind of want to shave my head, but like it's scary. I don't know whether I should do it. And maybe the result I'd like to receive from shaving the head, there's another way to do it. Maybe I don't have to shave the head to, create the rebirth, because not everyone has to shave their head to do the rebirth. But for me, it actually felt really pivotal because I used to have like big curly hair and kind of that's the first thing people saw. And it, the way we present ourselves and the way we look, it kind of gives a first impression and how people approach us and all of these things. And with the hair, I kind of became this. I think I just got bored out of being this pretty girl with a pretty face and pretty hair. Like it was just this, okay, that's great, thank you. But like there's so much more to me than that. So yeah, around that time, I was also becoming 30. I was turning 30. So I felt, okay, this is a big portal, like becoming 30. I'm ending the 20s and I'm starting a whole new decade. And I do love a nice, like a beautiful ritual, like a powerful ritual like that, burning the architecture things. And I did few of those by now. Um, yeah, like turning 30, I asked, I think 13 of my friends, 12 or 13 of my friends, I gathered them and they sat around me and, I tied my hair and my intention was to just clear out, release anything that doesn't feel like me from my 20s. Because in my 20s, I explored so much. I did so much. Like I just went into so many communities, so many practices, and I met so many people and I just did so much, I feel like, and I never stopped. So 30 and 30s feels like a different energy. So I wanted to close that energy as well. So it was kind of releasing all that energy and opening up. Because the hair can hold memory as well, it can hold energy. So I wanted to release all of that. It felt really intense, I have to say, because I also realized all the friends I invited, they're like my closest friends, they were all space holders. They were either coaches or healers. So there's like people holding space. And Elaine was there, one of the people we know, one of my teachers, Elaine Young. I learned so much from her about energy, how to hold energy and breath work. She was sitting like right behind me. And then after I shaved, I looked at myself in the mirror, and then everyone came and sat in front of me one by one and witnessed me. So they would eye gaze with me in that raw, vulnerable form. It was really intense, I have to say. It was like so vulnerable. Um, but I had the best like friends who were there for me. And yeah, and then we did like a group hug, and two of my friends, one of them sang, one of them danced. Yeah, it was a real like ritual and celebration. So after that, yeah, I did go into a bit of a rebirth. So it felt really open, I have to say. Like having hair, like especially that much hair, and then not having it all of a sudden, it's like there's nowhere to hide. Like literally everyone is seeing me. And yeah, that felt, I want to say it's not scary, but just tender, like tender and raw. And for a few months, something interesting happened. My words were a little bit weird, like as if I were literally reborn, and I couldn't find my words. Like I couldn't communicate. Like now I'm talking, but back then I was like, oh, like just the words were just not. I was still finding like new words almost. Um, yeah. And then around that time, I also decided I would always share my personal life on social media very openly, very vulnerably, whatever I was going through. Not to air out all the things I'm doing, but just I like to, the way I live life is I live something, I learn, and I like to pass on the learning. I like to pass on the teaching because it's a lived experience. It's real. It's not like a theory. I've actually lived it. Anyone who's interested, here's you can learn from it. Um, so that felt like I've done that for 7 years and I'm not going to do that as much. Still, when I go on podcasts like this or, I write books or other forms of creation when I'm in workshops, I always give personal examples, but not just sharing as much on social media. That happened. I started to wear more colors, like you said. My writing came back online, start to write more. I start to have more inwards time as well, like a maturing, I feel like also start to happen. Much more grounded, much more rooted. I went to Vipassana back then. I think you did it too. I remember that. It was literally 2 months after I shaved my head. And it was so funny because in Vipassana, you go there and it's 10 days of silence, right? And you sit on the same spot every day. And people just like create stories about you, and you might also just create stories about people. So everyone just thought I'm just this monk, just shaved the head, and I've been doing this all my life. But I had a septum piercing, so they were like, "What? She's a bit like what is she?" So anyway, and then we talked, and it's like, no, I just shaved my head, just separate from Buddhism. It's just a different thing. Yeah, so that happened. Um, yeah, it just feels like a much more cleaner version of me, I want to say, like more true, open, giving less fucks about people, maybe. Like, I'm not trying to prove, I'm not trying to show anyone to anything. Still, it comes up every now and then I notice it. But most things I do, I kind of do it because I want to do it. And especially last year, I'm doing it and I'm not needing to explain myself, um, which feels like freedom. So that's great. Yeah.
Mm. Wow. I literally had goosebumps as you were saying about your friends witnessing you in that moment. Wow, it's
Mm.
so
Mm.
powerful. Wow. And just also the reminder of the power of the ritual and a rite of
Yeah.
passage in a way, right? That we've forgotten and lost. Um, Curious if you want to speak more into that and the importance of ritual and rites of passages.
Yeah, would love to, because it's so important. We, as we live life, we go through different transitions. Like there's a beautiful saying. It's something like the only constant is change. There's always going to be change. Like nothing's going to stay the same. And I think suffering comes from maybe holding on to how things were instead of like actually let's just surrender to what's happening in life and what's what wants to move through us, in this moment, and actually being open to that and allowing that and really listening and receiving that. So I've actually been to a recent rites of passage of really good friend of mine in London a month ago, maybe. She did a mama and a baby blessing. So usually it's done as a baby blessing, right? But actually, the mother is also going through rites of passage. Like she's pregnant, she's becoming a mother, and this blessing. Like I won't go into detail of what we did, but we essentially celebrated the mother. We honored the mother. We, saw her and kind of words of encouragement and words of love of the passage that she's about to go in. And yeah, she's just held by all of her loved ones. And we also wish all of our blessings like to the baby as well. And that's just so beautiful, I think. And such a great thing. I feel like those rites of passages, they're really powerful if they're honored and celebrated in community. We can also do a one-to-one, but something about community energy. Um, like we feel held, we feel belonged, we feel loved and seen. Like something about us, like I can also speak for myself, like every time I change, and I've changed a lot, like definitely I'm like someone who changes quite fast as well. And every time I've changed, it's been so amazing for me and healing for me, and supportive when I see like my friends there going, like, we love you, we're still here and we support you in this next thing you're gonna do, and they might be on the path with me and some are not. Like I have a really good friend here in Istanbul and she's just seen, get a bit emotional. Um, she's, she's literally seen, oh, I wasn't really expecting this at all. She's literally seen all of my versions from before, like first year of studying architecture, like all the way to now. And we're still very close. Like we've always been, stayed in touch every time I visited Istanbul. And, um, I've also been there for her and she's been there for me. And I'm going to see her actually this, this Sunday. And that's just been amazing. So I think as human beings, what I'm trying to get to is we want to be seen and we want to be loved. Like that's all we want. Actually, it's just all of our needs are kind of derivative from these. And when we have those rites of passages and we honor them with a ritual, and it doesn't have to be as intense as I do them, like some burning or shaving head going on. It can be a small ritual. It can be maybe you gather with friends in forest and you all sing and they share a word that they see something in you, a quality in you, and then you do a group hug. It can be as simple as that. Or maybe you want to do it alone. You go to a river and you maybe set the intention of what you're letting go of, and then you kind of put it into a leaf energetically and you let that go, or a stone, whatever it might be. I always do this kind of things. Yeah. And it also connects us to the cycles of nature, like the whole seasons, um, like the spring and summer and autumn and winter. And as as the seasons transition, you look at nature and you see how, like the leaves, as they're falling down, they don't try to hold on. Or there's winter, like the branches are old, there's no leaves, and it doesn't go, oh my God, I'm scared. It just surrenders to it. And then spring comes, and then there's new life. And then summer, oh my God, it blooms. So there's like a total surrender in nature. And I think we are nature. We come from nature. We're going to go back to nature. And if we honor these seasons in our lives, there's just so much more flow, I feel. There's just so much more creativity, there's more imagination, there's more inspiration. Like more of life can truly flow through you. And these rites of passages, I think they're good to honor, and to acknowledge that change.
Mm, mm, so beautifully connected and articulated. Vulnerability comes up for me as you're sharing that. Even like if I think about myself and creating a ritual or gathering group
Mm.
of people and being seen and all of that, that takes something. And I think it's
Hmm.
so easy to just be like, ugh, no, it's scary. I don't want to be seen. So I
Yeah.
wonder how do we embrace like vulnerability more and
Mm. Yeah, that's actually a great point. So when I did that rebirth ritual of shaving my head, I actually had a lot of a lot came up for me when I was reaching out to my friends and asking them, hey, I'm celebrating my birthday, but I'm also going to shave my head, and I'd love you to be there and, hold the space and then come and, do the eye gazing thing. And would you like to be there? Just even reaching out to my friends and sending those like voice notes. I was like, oh, there was so many moments where my ego and my mind was telling me like, oh, you don't need to do this. Like, why are you making such a big thing out of it? This is so like radical, and you know, um, it's a lot to ask from people. But that's why it's great to actually listen to our intuition, listen to our hearts, and be aware of like what's our truth. Because that's my story, isn't it? That's my ego and my story kind of wants me to stay hidden and small and secure. But my truth was, no, this is actually a big transition for me. And I would love to ask for the support of my friends. And they can say no. Like, I'm not forcing them. They have the right to say no. So, but yeah, it felt really vulnerable to ask that. And it felt even more vulnerable of them like witnessing me, and I'm here, shaving my head, and I don't even know what I'm gonna look like. And they're seeing it before I do. So yeah, then coming and holding me, but it was also so transformational and so healing. I think when we allow ourselves to be held by others, they can almost hold us where we can't hold ourselves. We can hold ourselves, of course, but there's something extra that comes, like almost like an extra padding from the outside. Like you holding yourself versus you holding yourself, and then four other people holding yourself. That's like great. So that's what you get to receive when you feel vulnerable, but then you actually take that leap of being brave. Actually, it does require, courage. And then it's very healing. And after that ritual, the rebirth ritual, literally every single one of my friends felt so inspired to hold rituals for themselves. Like, wow, it felt almost very primal, very primitive, but almost like a modern day primal ritual of something ancient. I want to do this in my life too, not shaving their head, obviously, but their version of it, whatever that might be. So I feel like when we're vulnerable and we're following our truth, it gives inspiration to other people to their own thing in their own way. So there's that extra benefit. Your vulnerability can also serve other people. And
Mm.
that's not the intention you go with. You're vulnerable because that's true, but as a positive side effect, that often happens as well.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, and also like what I'm hearing in this conversation as well, like the power of community and
Mm.
people around you. Like I'm a very I love my space. I love being in my own bubble. And I know you too. So I was curious if
Mm.
like how do you balance that? Because you're quite social, but you're also like to be in your space. And I wonder, is this, the way of a someone who is creative, who yeah, essentially who's created that
Mm.
they need that space, and how do you navigate that?
Mm. That's a great question. Um, so I feel like we said earlier, it's good to honor different phases in life, different seasons. And I love that you asked that in your form. What season are you in your life right now? Because our life has different seasons. So let's say, let's say I'm in a summer season. I'm out, I'm creating, but there's a part in my mind going, no, but I should also go inwards to create. Then it's forcing. But the flow is just allowing me to be out and doing things. And so I kind of listen to what's needed. I kind of listen to what's life asking me of. If there are more opportunities coming my way, I take them and I go, okay, yes, then we're going to be outward for a bit. But I also listen to my body. I go, okay, am I getting a bit tired? There's time to rest. So, okay, there's actually many threads in this conversation, in the question. Um, so I think as a person, I'm kind of right in the middle. I really feel like when I'm social, I'm really social and I love people and I love connecting and having conversations and kind of going into different environments, different communities and people and different activities. But then after a while, like I like to just kind of complete and then go into my bubble. Like kind of, okay, now it's alone time, me time, turn off phone, like it's just me, my own energy. And I take a bath, like often bath is just like that warmth and the hot. So I'm like covered in my bath. It's like, well, this is great. I do that. Or like I do a workout, like when I do a workout or I run, like I'm really in my bubble. And I recently joined this gym and I do my thing, but I look really intense, I think, and I see all the people in the gym kind of saying hi, 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 and I'm like, I'm not really social at gym at all. I'm like really focused doing my thing. So yeah, I think it's a balance. Typically, like in a day, on a more maybe practical level, like I start my day and I do some like journaling. I journal about like the day before just to process it, complete it, close it. And then I may go for a walk or the gym. So there's kind of like alone time. I kind of just in my energy and kind of grounding myself in me. And then in the day, I'm probably doing sessions or seeing people. Like my day is actually filled with people in some ways. And then in the evening, I might, yeah, you know, come back to my own bubble or see people. So it really depends. I noticed in around, especially around this time of the year, I'm a little bit more inward. So maybe autumn, wintry time, I'm seeing less people compared to maybe normal. Um, yeah, like I realized after giving this men's retreat in October, I came back and like for 2 weeks, I actually didn't see anyone, I think. I still kept in touch with my friends, you know, through like phone calls or voice notes and things like that. But something about I really wanted to cultivate and receive the gifts and the fruits from that retreat because every time I hold space and I serve in some ways, I also expand, I also evolve, and I want to ground that in, I want to integrate that in for the next thing, whatever that is. And then you mentioned about the creativity, someone who's creating. Yes, so you know, I create on my own. I feel like creativity requires some alone time. Like you create an alone time and you sit down or you go for a walk, whatever it is for you, you're just open and there's silence. I feel like silence is so important. Just to stay and listen and pay attention. I realize this more so with the book I've written. It's a 3 years in the making, and it started off as a TikTok series during pandemic, and I made these videos and I transcribed them, and it became a book. And for the last 2 years, I've been writing it and editing it. And the last year, I have a friend who's an illustrator, and we've been making illustrations for each lesson. There's 140 lessons, so 140 illustrations, and we've been meeting up every Friday and kind of changing it and editing it. And that required a lot of the collaboration part. Of course, we're doing it together, but like my part requires a lot of alone time and silence. And like I get inspiration when I'm on my own. Sure, when I'm with other people as well, but almost I need some alone time after to kind of receive the fruits from it. So, for example, like after our conversation, I'm gonna like journal a bit. This has been, you know, things are coming in and I'm, you know, noticing it. So yeah, I think I also want to say everyone is very different, and the best thing is to just explore and try it out yourself, not to be scared from being on your own. Aloneness and feeling lonely are very different things, and I feel like when you're alone, like when I'm alone, I can never be lonely because there's so many parts in me. There's just so much there. But if I'm disconnected from myself, I might feel lonely. So I feel there's a difference. Um, yeah.
Mm, mm, mm. And you know, looking at your life and your evolution and how you came to be and exploring different things, and now you came to be an intuition coach and you hold breathwork sessions which are naked, which is very unique, and like no, I don't know of anyone else who's doing that. So those are like very like outrageous and bold and unique things for someone to own and do. um, and I feel like if more of us could connect to really themselves, who they really are, and follow the flow of life, different seasons, embracing and owning, their needs, desires, I think more of those unique offerings would flow out there into the world. And there's a question that I've not formulated, but it's something around, you know, maybe even curiosity, how you came into those offerings and embrace them, because it's very,
Mm.
out of the box.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. So I'll answer the intuition and then the naked breathwork part. So with the intuition, I do a lot of visioning in the session. So we start by looking into the difference between ego and soul, our mind and our heart, and how can we listen to our soul and our heart more and receive intuitive next steps from that. And the visioning is we like in a session we step into, let's say someone wants to write a book or they want to create a business or a relationship. We step into the full flourishment of that and we receive that intuitively, kind of like an intuitive reading and coaching, like at the same time. And I love doing this. And I've been doing this for like 7, 8 years. And out of everything I do, I realized I like to bring in some visioning somewhere, like some intuition, some visioning in a breath work or in a dance or meditation. So that was like a common thread across everything. It's like, oh, okay, I like to do things in a, intuitive, visioning-y kind of way. It's like there's another quote, kind of like giving quotes. Steve Jobs, he says you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can connect them looking backwards. So when I look back, I can see, wow, there's all these intuitive bits that I've been doing. Like even I use this circle work, which I learned at that training, Natural Success. You define the circle as the vision, you step in, see what you get. Just like how you would enter a room, you'll get a feeling from it. And even in architecture, I would do like circly designs, so things would always connect. So yeah, the intuition, I've done that work for 7, 8 years, but I would say in the last 2 years, I've really like honed in on it. I'm like, cool, like this is what I'm doing, like call it intuition coaching. Before it was maybe transformational, empowerment, some other coach, but like this is what we're doing within that. So I might as well call it what it is, intuition coach, like helping people to connect with their intuition and act accordingly to those steps. And that also came with the more I followed my own intuition and took these steps. All these steps came from my intuition as well, like how I create naked breath work and doing that rebirth ritual and just running my business in the way I run it. I've also received a lot of like business coaching, but I would always filter it from my own, intuition. And I got the result when I didn't. It would just be like really bad. So I learned from that as well. And the naked breath work, how it came about at the time, so it was 2021, up until then, I've already been holding breathwork journeys for 4 years. And they were around 30 people, like 20, 30 people every month in London. And they were amazing, very powerful and growing. And there was an amazing community. So when I did that somatic sex education training, and we covered a lot of, body image, um, nudity, and different things around sexuality. But the one that stood out for me was like nudity, like how our nudity can be sexualized in our, society, especially like women's nudity. So, but nudity, it doesn't have to be that. It can be, you look at a child, it's naked, it's just innocent and free, and there's no layers. So I like really resonated with that. And I started to kind of feel into, okay, I've done this training. How can I like bring this into my existing work? And I thought about breath work because that's like embodied, it's about the body. And I thought, well, let's just do it naked. Let's see what happens. Like it was an idea. And um, I invited 7 of my friends that I know are from the sex positive community as well. And they've done breath work before. So it was a bit of a tester to see how it would go. And in those naked breathwork workshops, we have an opening circle, then a conscious undressing ritual, and we remove an item of clothing with something we want to release, and then we witness each other. So it's super healing. We do that few rounds, and you're always at choice. You can keep your eyes closed if you want. You don't have to remove any clothing if you don't want to. So I guide people through different prompts, like what does your body need right now? Then we start the breath work. So even when we start the breath work, you've already released a lot. Actually, you've been vulnerable and naked, and you see that you haven't died. This is actually great. Like this is very, freeing. So um yeah, I think our intuition, it just nudges us the whole time. It's about listening to it and acting on it. Because this was my intuition telling me, like, do it naked. And I was like, oh shit, that's a bit scary. Like, all these things, I've always been scared, by the way. It's not like I'm just nailing through life and smashing and doing these outrageous steps as if, like, I'm losing my shit half the time, but I'm still doing it because I know, like, I had so many proof by now that if my intuition is talking to me and is telling me to do something, I have to do it. Because if I don't do it, it's just going to be not great. But if I do it, it's going to be like double greater, you know? Because you can also think about intuition like a friend and imagine it's asking you out, like, hey, do you want to have coffee? Do you want to have dinner? And you're always saying no, you're not listening to it. That friend's going to stop asking you after a while. It's just going to give up. So it's kind of like that. It's like a muscle that you train, you listen to it. And the more you listen, it's like a whisper in the beginning. It starts to become louder and louder, and it starts to become as loud as like your mind's voice, like as visceral and real. So you can listen to it and act on it. I forgot your question now. What was the question?
I also forgot. I think it's how it all came to be.
Oh yeah,
The
yeah.
offerings, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's really about sometimes people might have this thing of I need to know all the steps before I can begin. No, you don't. You just have to know the first step. Because if you know all the steps, you've created the steps from the mind. You've logically laid it out. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to kind of live in a more magical way and actually be present to all that life has to offer to you, the intuition tells you the next step, you follow it, and you check in again because your reality is going to change after that step. You're going to change, then you can make a relevant choice again. But if you just make a choice and then you just carry on with all the steps without even listening or paying attention to what's happening, or maybe, do I even still want to do this? Maybe it changed. Maybe I want to do it in a different way. Um, yeah. So taking the next step, listening to intuition, but also always keep on checking in. And it's okay not to know the whole step, the whole staircase.
Mm, wow. Yeah, and so what I'm hearing also, it's like your journey and like journey for anyone really who wants to live, an authentic, aligned, wholesome life is to like really following your curiosity and following those
Mm.
breadcrumbs, following those intuitive nudges. And then it's so interesting that you've mentioned this Steve Jobs quote because literally yesterday, I think I heard it on the podcast as well, and now you're mentioning, I'm
No
like,
way.
oh, yeah. So, and also like embracing that it may not make sense in the moment, and trusting that process and trusting that journey, um,
Mm.
and then looking back and seeing the patterns of like, oh, actually, I'm actually working a lot with men. Oh, maybe that's the direction I want to go, and vice versa. um hmm.
Yeah. I also want to add there was another turning point where um, I work very intensely because I'm an intense person and I just own that. I think 2, 3 years ago, I was like, you know what? I'm intense and I like working with intense people and I create intense spaces. Naked breathwork is actually very intense. But because it's very intense, you get to have a super healing experience in one night, and that could be 10 years worth of therapy. Like people actually reported they healed like a trauma they experienced years ago and it was gone. And that's a group experience. It's not even, one to one and you go, deep. It's super deep. So I'm very good at creating deep and intense healing and transformational spaces, one-to-one or group. So once I owned that, I stopped being like wishy-washy and like talking in this, hi, welcome everyone. Today we're gonna like, that's not me. I'm like an arrow. And I just relaxed when I actually dropped into that. This also happened maybe like after shaving my head. I just kind of the good girl conditioning that was there, and it still pops up, especially now that I'm back in Turkey. I can just see it, creeping up when I'm trying to set a boundary, and it's kind of non-existent in the culture. So like owning who you are as well, because if we're being ourselves, the, we have also the gifts that are a match to that. So because I love intensity and I'm very good at it, it's probably not my best point to create restful, restorative places. I can do that, but I'm not going to try to do a very restful sound healing journey. That's not me. Maybe I'll do the breath work before and then someone else can come in and they can do that restorative bit because I can just feel in me, like, let's say the intense part in me is like a cheetah wanting to run, but we're just chilling here. And it's like, yeah, but my energy is over there. So also listening to your own inner energy, like where does it want to go? Does it want to go over here where it's a little bit more fiery? Or is it over here a bit more watery? Maybe elements are a good indicator as well. Are you more airy or watery or earthy or fiery? I know by nature I'm not that earthy. Actually, I had to work on my grounding and the meditating and spending time with trees, and I have a lot of earthy friends. They ground me. Um, so I know I'm not going to create earthy workshops. That's like, there's no point in trying. So that's also great to know, like, where are your strengths and actually going towards these strengths. I'm very good at creating intensive experiences. So I'm not going to run maybe a year-long coaching thing. I might do a 6-week thing. I might do a group thing if I'm doing, or a 3 month max, really, because by the end of that 3 months, I'm going to be different. Maybe I want to create something else, at least for now, at this point of time in my life. It might change. So that was also a huge, just, wow, I can just relax into this nature of me and create from this place.
This is so powerful. I'm already making a note in my head to go back and rewatch it because it really speaks to me as well. And yeah, what I'm hearing is like really like on the journey of self-discovery, really discovering who you are and then owning it. And it feels like as soon as you own
Mm,
that, you can relax. It's like there's no need to facilitate, all these different elements and like please everyone. It's like, no, this is how I operate. You come in or like you don't have to, and being
yeah.
empowered by that, that's super, super powerful. Because I think a lot of us usually are in the space of like not knowing and then trying, but yeah, it's all trial and error, I
Yeah.
guess.
And if you're a coach or healer or you work with people, you also, once you're becoming more yourself, you're going to attract much more aligned clients because they get to see, it's almost like you're a lighthouse and your light is out and you're putting out the right light, like the true light, and they can see it and go, yes, I want to work with that person because I like their vibe. But if you're trying to be someone else, you're going to attract someone that's a match to that, and it's just not going to be really aligned. Um, so like now, currently, I start to work more with men who are like highly masculine, really like healthy masculine, and they're open to like spirituality too. Like they love and they explore, and I'm working with them to connect them into their hearts more, like their hearts and bodies, and how to listen to their intuition. So it's amazing because I have to be this direct arrow person that I am. Like if I'm being this soft, whatever, it doesn't work. Like it's almost, there's no place with those men like for that. So it's also allowing me to step up and be more me, like even 10K, 10x more me, which is, that's the true match. Um, yeah. So be
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
Yeah, wow. It's almost, yeah, the more we kind of understand and know ourselves, how we operate, the more we embrace that, the more we're in the current with life. So there's no like struggle pushing through. It's like, ah, that's just obviously there's going to be challenges and things we'll have to
Mm,
overcome, but it feels more like embodied and it's aligned and mm,
mm,
mm, wow. Wow, that's very like it's really inspiring to speak to you and like learn from you and hear
oh,
about
thank
your journey. Is there anything else you want to share as a closing? I don't know if there's anything your intuition was nudging you or something you want to
you.
add.
I think it's really important to maybe we covered this a little bit in the rites of passage, but as you're being more of you, becoming more of your authentic version, which is it's more of an unveiling, uncovering, remembering. It's never like you go out and you have to find who you are. It's like in you, and we're just removing the bits that, you know, got covered there. It's important to, I feel, also surround ourselves with people who get us, like people who see us for who we are. And because when we forget, we can turn to them and like, hey, can you remind me of, you know, who I am? Like I remember, I think it was around 2021, I did a lot of like way more than I usually used to do, a lot of like darkness work, like shadow work, and I've uncovered like a lot of my darkness for a whole year. That's where also naked breathwork was born. So and I was doing that training or the somatic sex education. I had to message one of my good friends at the time, hey, I've been in a lot of like exploring my dark parts recently. Can you remind me of my lightness? Like, can you actually just tell me the bits that I need to remember? And she was great. She just wrote me a whole message and like a whole essay. And I was like, oh, this is like SOS in times of need, you know? So asking for support, but from the right people, like the true people that see us and will, you know, be there for us. And you know, we don't need many. You only need one or two of those, to be honest. It's great if you have four or five, but like one or two is like, you know, like for life friends. I find that's really important. I think there's a Winnie the Pooh quote. Let's end with another last quote. um, it says something like, you know, the saying, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And it says it's about the company, actually. And I really feel that. And I believe that. There's another like saying in Into the Wild, the movie, happiness is real when it's shared. It's true. Like, I'm so grateful for all the things I've created and the transformations and the success and all of it. But if I didn't have like friends or partners that I could share it with, it's just like me just going through life on my own, like leveling up, but like for what, you know? So I think sharing that with loved ones and having people around us that can remind us of our true nature when we forget, that's like really important as well.
Beautiful. And thank you for sharing your true nature with us and online and
No,
yeah, just being a bubble of joy and energy. As I said, it's
thank
so rare
you.
to really meet people that are so happy, so alive, and yeah, it's such a breath of fresh air. So thank you for being that in the world.
Oh, thank you so much. I also want to say, like, I know you might look like joy and happy and all that, but I have low days as well. I just want to like mention that, just like anyone, because sometimes my clients come to me and they're like, "Do you ever have bad days?" I'm like, "Of course I do. Like, I'm human." So yeah, like everyone experiences that. I just want to say that as well.
Yeah, but I think what you're really good at is to alchemizing that into, service and
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, definitely. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This was
Oh, thanks
great.
for
It was
coming.
very
Yeah.
inspiring for me as well. I want to like listen to it back and like take notes and make some reels out of it or something. Yeah.
Okay, then I'm gonna stop.